According to the official report, there was no risk. The assessment had been completed by qualified analysts. The data had been reviewed, processed, and compared against historical models. Environmental variables were within acceptable limits. Structural indicators showed stability. Forecast projections suggested no escalation. The conclusion was clear, concise, and definitive. Risk level, none. The document was signed, time-stamped, and distributed to the relevant departments. It was not treated as a suggestion. It was treated as a confirmation. Operations continued as planned. The report itself followed a familiar structure. Observations were collected over a defined monitoring period. Data points were categorized. Outliers were examined and either validated or dismissed. Thresholds determined what qualified as actionable danger and what remained statistically insignificant. Every step had been followed, but the process contained an assumption that no one questioned. The models used to calculate risk were built on past events. They relied on patterns that had already occurred. They were designed to recognize familiar escalation pathways. What they could not recognize was something new. In the hours leading up to the assessment, small irregularities had been recorded, minor fluctuations in readings, slight deviations from baseline conditions. None of them individually exceeded the alert threshold. Each one, when isolated, appear harmless. The system logged them as acceptable variance. When analysts reviewed the compiled data, they saw what they expected to see: normal behavior. The irregularities blended into the background of routine noise. Statistical smoothing eliminated spikes that might have drawn attention. In graphical form, the data appeared stable. The report reflected that stability. What it did not reflect was how those minor irregularities were interacting with one another. The model evaluated variables independently. It did not calculate how subtle shifts, occurring simultaneously across multiple systems, could amplify each other. The danger was not obvious. It was cumulative. By the time the report was circulated, confidence was high. The absence of risk was not merely a technical conclusion. It was an operational reassurance. Restrictions were relaxed. Safeguards were scaled back. Monitoring intensity decreased. The logic was simple. There was no reason to maintain emergency posture if the assessment showed no threat. Field teams, however, began noticing inconsistencies that did not align with the report's certainty. Changes in behavior. Conditions that felt unstable despite remaining within numeric limits. Their observations were recorded, but the numbers did not support escalation. Without numerical validation, concerns remained informal, and informal concerns do not override official reports. The first undeniable sign that something was wrong did not come from the monitoring system. It came from the environment itself, a sudden shift that, in retrospect, had been building slowly beneath the surface. When it happened, it appeared abrupt, unexpected, unrelated to prior data. But it wasn't unrelated. The minor irregularities that had been dismissed as noise were part of the same trajectory. The model simply lacked a framework to connect them. The report had not been falsified. It had not been rushed. It had not ignored obvious warnings. It had followed procedure exactly. That was the problem. The evaluation process was optimized for clarity. It required thresholds to be crossed before risk could be acknowledged. Ambiguity was treated as acceptable until it became measurable. By the time it became measurable, intervention options were limited. In the internal review that followed, investigators did not find negligence. They found design limitations. The risk model had not accounted for compound instability. It assumed linear progression. It did not anticipate simultaneous minor deviations converging into major failure. The phrase "no risk" remained technically accurate at the moment it was written. It simply did not remain accurate for long. One of the most unsettling aspects of the incident was how persuasive the report had been. The formatting, the language, the structured confidence, all of it reinforced the impression of certainty. The absence of warning language made alternative interpretations seem unreasonable. When a document states there is no risk, most people stop looking for one. The system had not failed dramatically. It had failed quietly. It had filtered uncertainty out of the equation because uncertainty complicates decision-making. It simplifies communication to declare stability. It is harder to say, "We are not sure." In subsequent revisions, the language of future assessments changed. Instead of absolute declarations, reports began incorporating probability ranges and scenario analysis. Minor deviations were weighted differently. Cross-variable interaction modeling was introduced, but none of those changes applied retroactively. The report that said there was no risk remained part of the record, and for those who relied on it, the distinction between statistical acceptability and real-world vulnerability was meaningless. The report was accurate within its framework. The framework was incomplete.